This meeting is being recorded.
All right. Welcome to the ESIP ITNI CDI Tech Stack Working Group. We're going to just give everyone a couple minutes to filter in. I see a lot of familiar faces on the call. Thanks for joining us today. We just got our comm checks in place, and it looks like we're just about ready to go. I've got a couple slides to go through, just sort of as our intro. So today we have Jim McAndrew from National Park Service. He's going to be reviewing a really neat suite of tools that he and his teammates have either put together or are putting into use. And he's going to give us an overview of the NPMap tools and techniques. And these are kind of a geospatial web application stack that those of us at USGS National Map are very interested in. Jim was formerly with us and now has taken his skill set over to Park Service. All right, so we're, yep, okay, for a minute or two after our start, I see that we've kind of got a critical mass. So thanks to everyone for joining us. This is the ESIP ITNI CDI Tech Stack Working Group. Today, we're gonna have Jim McAndrew provide a presentation giving us an overview of the National Park Service web mapping tools. Go ahead and go to the next slide. Jim, I wanted to give you an opportunity here. If you've got others from your team, did you want to just kind of shout out who you have on your side?
Yeah, I'm going to have, at least in this call, Jake Coolidge, who is our cartographer, and Delaney Callahan, who is working on a lot of the data pieces. Both of them should be here soon. I think we have a little bit of problems with Zoom and figuring out how to use it with organization.
Yeah, because we don't have the client anymore. You do have to come in through the web browser, and there's that link that you always forget to hit that says join by browser. So if you can be chatting with them and see if they are able to join us, that'll be great. Let us know if you want us to stall just for a little bit before we move on, because we do have a couple upcoming events as well.
You can continue, everybody's here.
Okay, hey, perfect. All right, so we're really pleased to have you, Jim, on board. Jim is with the National Park Service Information Services Center. He's going to be providing an overview of the tools and techniques that his team employs to really present the National Park Service web-based geospatial applications and front ends. The NPMap suite of web map tools enables NPS employees and partners to tell the story of the nation's most cherished places using innovative mapping techniques and technologies. We've been following Jim and the NPMap team for some time. I first saw an introduction to the NPMap suite of tools at State of the Map probably 10 years ago. Is that about right, Jim? Maybe more?
Probably. What do you know where it was?
Yeah, it was the DC State of the Map. So was that?
I think that was 2014. So yeah.
Okay. Yeah, so it's been some time. And then a couple of the things that he and his team have been working on that we're really interested in are the Mapbox suite of tools and CartoDB. So they've taken that beyond where we were when we were exploring Mapbox back probably, again, eight years ago or so. And we're really excited to see where Jim has taken this, and hopefully we can do a follow-up tech exchange and also just learn a lot from how you've been able to manage the variety of tools that you have. Next slide. So wanted to provide just an update on an upcoming event. Sky Bristol has, with USGS, has asked for us to host the GeoCollaborate team, and this will be coming up in April. So it'll be Sky, and then I believe Dave Prager, and they're going to provide an overview of a geospatial data collaboration platform called GeoCollaborate, and they have ties to ESIP. They have previously been an award winner from ESIP, and we're really kind of interested to see where they've gone with the platform since they gave a presentation, Megan, maybe 2 years ago. Would they be a 2020 or 2021? ESA
2020 partner year, I believe it was.
Okay, great. Yeah, so we're pretty excited to have that. I don't think Sky is available. Sky, if you are out there, go ahead and say something. I don't see him. Megan, do you see Sky on?
Guy's here.
There you go. Sky is. So, all right.
Yeah, thanks. Both Dave and their chief scientist, Dr. Prager, will be on with us, and we're going to focus this on kind of some specific use cases that we've been working through around fire and other hazards responses, around using the kind of platform that they have for delivering congressional briefings and press briefings and those kinds of things. So I think there's some good possibilities with it, and we look forward to seeing where they are. The exciting part for us right now is that they're on they're part of an SBIR program. They've had funding for a few years from NASA to develop this platform. So they're very easy for us to get to right now under that program if we choose to do something with them on a contract basis. So we'll be taking a look at that next month. So thanks.
Hey, Sky, that's really neat. So the platform is available to us if we want to run a couple demos?
I think that we can probably work that out. I'm also talking to some NOAA colleagues. They've just recently put a new IDIQ in place with GeoCollaborate for use in NOAA. So we're looking forward to seeing where they're heading with it and seeing what all we can do to get up to speed and see where it might plug into some of our use cases.
Terrific. All right. Well, I'll be in touch with you, Sky, so that we can start to work on that slide deck. And if I'd be kind of neat to see if they're willing to do a live demo.
Yeah, that's
I took a look. Yep. Cool. Okay, Sky, anything else?
No, thank you.
Yeah, thank you. All right. With that, I'd like to kind of get going with Jim and his team. And if you want to introduce your team members, feel free to.
All right, so I'm here with my team members, Delaney Callahan, who is working on a lot of the data imports for us right now, and she's really familiar with all the data workflows. And Jay Coolidge, who also has his camera on, he is working with a lot of the cartography, but a lot of that is also just understanding the data very well so we can put it on the map. All right, let me start this screen share. Maybe. There we go. All right. So yeah, we have me, I'm Jim McAndrew, and Delaney Callahan and Jay Coolidge are here representing the digital map tools that we use, sometimes called NPMap, sometimes just called the National Park Mapping Suite. But our main product is this thing called Park Tiles. This is an example of our current Park Tiles right now in DC. This is version 4, which is our current version that we're putting out there. And you can see a lot of the icons that we have all coming in from the Park Service. We have some buildings coming in from Microsoft. We have them coming in from OpenStreetMap. We have some really cool things here that Jake has worked on with different subway lines, so you know which lines go to each station. So I wanted to start with the beginning of where Park Tiles even came from. And we started this, well, we didn't start this, but years ago, Unigrid Maps were the kind of the first iconic maps that people think of, at least. And they came out in 1978. They added that black bar in 1999, and they make apparently 23 million copies of these things a year. So they're still very popular. I don't know if our maps will ever be that popular, but we decided to take kind of some of the design considerations from that and turn it into multi-scale cartography, which has led us to figuring out how to collect all of this. information from everywhere. And first, we started out using OpenStreetMap data pretty much everywhere. And we just started throwing our own little park points on top of it, and we included some park boundaries. We did include our own points of interest as a separate layer that was toggleable. And there was a Park Tiles 1 kind of, but it wasn't publicly released. So Park Tiles 2 is when it really got out there as something that people could see. And this is just an example of how we did the multi-scale cartography. This is all Grand Canyon. You're zoomed out and just get a little closer. When you get to here, you can start seeing the visitor centers. When you come in more, you can see the roads. And remember, this is all OpenStreetMap data at this time. And we can see that we have these visitor center icons as well as like food and hiking. And we've evolved on these icons since then. This kind of is a description of just where everything came from. If it was white, that means that it was it's a layer that we got from the National Park Service. And anything in black, I guess dark gray, came from, we were using Mapbox at the time. So these are all Mapbox layers, the background, the hillshade, which you can kind of see here. And all this water, the roads, trails, buildings, and place labels like this Coulter Bay Village. And everything else came out of, which isn't much here, the points of interest, the park polygons that you can see the dark green color here, that all came from the Park Service. Another big part of creating this was coming up with our own symbol set. This was the first version of that NPS symbol library that is now mostly managed by Jake. And this was based off of a library from Mapbox called Maki. We renamed it to NP Maki and put our own icons in it. And this just allowed a sprite to be loaded so we could get these things on our map. We've since evolved from this to now using, we use a hybrid approach of the existing system as well as SVGs. But this is at least where it all started. Just one other thing I wanted to point out about this is we had to simplify everything ourselves. The idea of like simplifying things into tiles, especially raster tiles, didn't really exist at that time. So this, you can see each one of these lines is us doing a simplification for each zoom level. This was actually done previously in a materialized view that made it a lot faster to run this query. I'm having everything pre-processed, but that pre-processing could take a while, and iteration on these maps was really slow. So we moved up to Park Tiles 3, and the big difference here is that we're now using NPS data inside the parks and NHD data for all these lakes. This was not the newest of pictures, so it's a little blurry, but I hope you can figure it out. We moved to a teardrop icon instead of just the icons directly on the map. That made it a little bit easier for people to interact with them. And it kind of dealt with issues where the icons overlapped. These are actually a separate icon on top of the map, so they're not embedded in that raster layer. They are a vector layer drawn on top. But the tiles are all raster, so everything here is just baked together. You can't separate the road from the park boundary, at least at this type of cartography that we're using here. A big thing that we wanted to do for this is make it mobile first, or at least mobile ready. At this point, this was in 2016, we were making a separate app park by park. I just really wanted to point that out, that this was a little bit of a cumbersome process to create special maps for each park. So we wanted to move on to Park Tiles 4. I'm kind of going fast here through all these, but Park Tiles 4 was the idea of bringing everything to vector, bringing everything so we can make a service-wide app, and bringing everything in. So I've said all data within the parks comes from the individual park or regional GIS. Now I have an asterisk here, because not everything really comes from the parks. I know the NHD data is still being displayed for water. Yellowstone, which is what we're looking at here, is pretty good for having the right data in it, but some parks do not have the greatest of sources. So we're working with them to use different sources. We can use Tiger, we can use OpenStreetMap. And we switched these up. These icons all got switched back to the original Unigrid kind of style. And now the icons are being baked back into the tiles because they're not raster, but instead vector. So we can then display them as the zoom level changes. And you can kind of see here that some of these show up as a dot instead of a shield. And that dot, if you zoomed in further, would presumably switch to being a shield, depending on if there is a shield for it. Also, we wanted to make all of those clickable. All right, I moved to the next slide. So Park Tiles 5 is our next big undertaking. And we want to get rid of a lot of stuff that we had been using. We want to take all of that OpenStreetMap data and take it out. Not that I have anything against OpenStreetMap data, but we have a lot of great sources. One big thing that is important about using data outside the parks that we have some access over is just lining up our roads. I can show you probably some examples of places where our roads end and OpenStreetMap starts. Because of licensing reasons, we can't align our roads to OpenStreetMap because that would violate the OpenStreetMap license. And we can't really go into OpenStreetMap and move the roads to match to ours because we don't control that data. Someone else can bring it back. Also, they probably have it there for a reason. So we'd be making their data wrong so it matches ours. A big thing we want to get rid of, though, is a lot of the Mapbox supplied tools they give us, that OSM data that give us a lot of boundaries and hillshade. And just part of this, we're trying to remove a lot of the old leaflet code. Leaflet was the system that we built everything in, but we have moved to just use the vector tiles, which do not really work with leaflet. You can bring them in as a plugin, but you can run it in Mapbox.js without that. We also are using some stuff called MapLibra, which is a next fork of the Mapbox.js library that is a little bit more open source. Mapbox has switched their direction, so this was something we're at least looking at. And replacing all of that data now, we're going to replace a lot of that OSM data with Tiger data coming out of the national map. And we want to use a lot of the boundaries from the national map or other. I found some Canadian boundaries from the USGS that I needed for a map, so they're in there. Hillshade, which I'll talk about in a little bit, and federal lands, which I think Delaney can talk about. Natural earth outside of the parks, we have, or outside of the US and looking at Africa, Europe, Asia, we don't need to have great maps there. People shouldn't be zooming in too much. And everything's kind of built around Postgres. So that's why I got that icon right in the middle. And the way that we do this is really cool. We bring everything into we just download it into our database raw in whatever format, whatever schema it comes in. And that way we can always keep those things up to date in their format. If their schema changes, we do need to work at that a little bit, but at least that's something that we can deal with. We run this. I mostly use Postgres views, but you can write them. You can write PLSQL, POPGSQL, or Python code directly into Postgres, so it can convert your stuff into a view directly. I added something like lookup tables. If you have, I'm sure everyone's familiar with NHD data, so if you have something in there, you just have an F code for it instead of what it actually is, like a creek or something. So you would use these extra tables just as lookups. And then once we have those, we filter them out into, or union them with other tables into either points, lines, or polygons. And that way we can make 3 separate kind of distinctions. And from there, we can split them out further using our schema. And this is kind of how our schema is set up. This particular one is all points. These are the most common points in our database. We use a hierarchy that goes superclass, class, and type. And just an example here is a campsite. A campsite is a type of camping, or it's within camping recreation. And within camping, it is within land recreation. and then we have an icon associated. And we kind of came up with this through various different tools that we were looking at. We were using OpenStreetMap. We were using stuff like the F codes, and there are other hierarchies out there. And we wanted to use something that would match up to most things, and we can just make extra types if we need to expand it a little bit. But the main reason we need to do this is to link everything to an icon, and that way it'll show up on the map. And for points, we have icons. For roads and stuff, we might have like road width and different information that would just kind of drive that. And a lot of that can also be made in the styling of the map itself. So some of these new services that we're using are probably familiar to, well, definitely familiar to everyone in the USGS, right? The National Map data sources. This is where I spend a lot of time is pulling data out of. These ArcGIS endpoints are really good just for seeing what's out there. The 3-dep one here is where we're pulling our hillshade, and you can pull some contour information out of there just for testing, but a big part of that would be downloading it directly from these stage products, which is amazing that that's available, because I can download, I think once every quarter, we download all of the hydrography. We just download everything. We run a script on it that just cuts out the parks, and then it puts that data into our database. And we can use this for a lot more. So that's a really great service. And I don't know if Delaney has access to the microphone right now, but
I think so. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Sweet. Yeah. So looking towards Park Tile 5, these are some additional data sources we're hoping to integrate into our own maps. The first of which being PAD-US, which is the protected areas database provided by USGS. You can see in the top there, that screenshot is local parks around San Francisco. So it's only local parks. You can see them near the Golden Gate National Recreation Areas. You can see how potentially, like in urban areas, how this data can kind of enrich what visitors are seeing on the base map. So that's hoping, hopefully that's going to come in geographic names. That is actually something we currently have displaying in Park Tiles 4. Zion National Park was kind of like our first test case to get these features in, which you can see in the middle screenshot there. We have essentially the process for that was we pulled down the national file and then filtered out those, we selected only those natural features of interest. So things like bars, basins, there's glaciers, ridges, rapids, canyons. So we pulled all those natural features labels down and then put them into the database. So right now, most are displaying as point labels. You can see peaks or summits in there as well. That was done, I believe, by a previous intern in another big push. So those have been in the maps for a minute. And then most recently, we started developing linear labels for obviously natural features that lend themselves well to that are linear naturally in shape, like canyons and valleys and things like that. So you can see Towers of the Virgin there and the Three Marys linear labels. And so we started developing those for parks. And so that's what we're going to for Park Tiles 5. We're hoping to get a lot of those linear labels developed because cartographically, I think it adds a really cool element, and it's based all on those geographic names. Railroad data, again, that's something slated for Park Tiles 5. That's coming from Tiger Line census data via USGS. And then federal land data, which is actually is sourced out through Esri, and it's kind of like an authoritative data set on all these different federally owned lands coming from those agencies listed there. So because we want to be able to show other lands other than just National Park Service lands on the base maps at a minimum. Yeah, that's kind of what we have planned for Park Tiles 5 sources and getting those together.
Yeah, thanks. And one thing that we are able to do is we have an exceptions table. So if we have maybe a line that we want to put in for the GNIS data, we can get rid of the point that they originally had and put a line feature in. And this would be something like a canyon or a mountain range where there'd be one single point. We can turn it to a line. We can put an exception, say we have a different geometry for that, so use the different one instead. And that way we can kind of put our own things in there while getting rid of the other ones. This is especially important in things like lakes, that are within parks. Sometimes they are. Sometimes the park has a more up-to-date version of their lake than NHD, especially things with changing water levels. So I wanted to just go over this hillshade briefly. We are taking that 3-depth service, and there's already a hillshade export in there. We're just using that, and we're exporting the hillshade tile by tile and running it through these 2 programs, GDAL Warp and GDAL Contour. This map that's actually displayed does not have GDAL Warp applied, and that's why you can see that the ocean has a shadow on it. We convert that using GDAL Contour into 5 layers. The 2 lightest layers are the side with the light shining, and the 3 darkest are the shadow side. In this particular map, I was just working on one of the highlight layers, and I changed it to purple to make it a little easier to see which layer I was looking at, because hillshade kind of just blends in. We're so used to looking on the map. And using the vector hillshade really allows us to build it directly into our tiles and not rely on a raster service behind the scenes. So to get this information out there, right now we are using a tool called Mapbox Atlas. And Atlas provides a way that we upload our MB tiles file, it's called, which is just a SQLite file containing all of our tiles in it. We can use AWS S3 directly by using tile buckets or buckets that are in this ZXY format. That's just zoom X and Y in a web Mercator. We use an MD5 or an SHA1 hash, depending on what system we're using, just to make sure you don't upload the same one twice. This is kind of future. We don't really have a way of doing this. We've kind of thought about it, and we have some internal systems running these things, but that's as far as we've really gotten with that. Vector tile package from Esri. These are what are used behind ArcGIS Online. We can use ArcGIS Online layers. They work very well. They use the same exact format as Mapbox, so everything just comes in nicely. I'm not sure if 1024 is the hard limit on vector tile bundles. They're just the standard bundle that Esri has been using for years. And the advantages of that is you can group these tiles into packages of 1024, which just makes it so it's a lot easier to update. You're only updating 1/1000th of the tiles, and with S3, I think it's 5 times as much to write than it is to read, depending on how you have your plan set up. So that would lead to a little bit of a cost savings if you are updating less tiles, but it really is kind of a balancing act there. There's a project called PM Tiles, rather, that has it allows you to build them all into a single file, and it uses kind of similar concepts as what Esri is doing. But they have some other tools that make it really easy to expand. And that's just something that is really interesting out there and cutting edge. And I've been watching the project just to see where it goes and may use some ideas from it. We're also adding a sidebar instead of pop-ups. This has been something people have been asking for a while. It does work in our demos, but we don't have any in production. A big thing holding us back now is designing this thing, the information, because now this is the same information we have on a pop-up, but now it's bigger, so we don't need to have the scroll bar. We can make it larger, and that's kind of the next phase we want to do in that. And we have a lot of really cool possibilities moving forward. I think that I can demo these a little bit, but let's see if I still have a screen up. Yeah. So this is the overview control kind of demo here. And this we've been working on to try to get it so we can now, I don't know how to use this very well. There. We can tilt and pan our map. So like the Grand Canyon, you can look, it's a linear park and you can kind of see the whole thing. And this down in the corner shows you exactly what view you're looking at, and you can move it around. And so you want to look from San Francisco and just look east. You can probably see, you can see Yosemite right there. Zoom in on it and interact with it. I have 2 more slides here, or 2 more windows. Yeah. So another project is out of Austria where they're trying to make 3D data based on these tiles. And there's a lot of projects out there. I know Mapbox is a very similar way of already doing this, but the advantage of using this is you can supply your own raster DEMs, and there are ways to just use the USGS data to create this DEM, and it would be really cool if we could use our own DOI data sources to display our own DEMs and allow a view like this in the Grand Canyon or something. Yeah, so that's really our whole history that I have. We're here for any questions or any discussions.
Megan, do you see any in the chat that have popped up?
No questions so far, just a question about whether this recording will be available later. So people are clearly loving the presentation, but others are welcome to please add your question to the chat.
And can people unmute themselves?
Yes, they are able to unmute
Okay.
themselves if they wish to.
Because I know we have several people who kind of represent our delivery services. We've got I saw some folks from SAS who kind of can represent PAD US. I'd really like to know, how you're using. Let's just start with the National Map Services, and what are some of the things that you've run into, limitations. We're always looking to see how our end users are first utilizing our services, of course, and then are you running into any issues with the data retrieval, and what would you like to see? And so I'm kind of representing National Map Delivery Services, and would really like to know.
All right, I'm seeing some good responses from Gita here about the railroad data is coming from the Fed Railroad Administration. I was wondering about that, where it actually came from, and the PAD US is already available in the national map, which makes it easier for us.
Well, not yet. It's not yet available. We're working toward that, though. And Greg Matthews can give you plenty of information on that. You've worked with Greg all the time, so that's where we're working toward. We're using that PAD US data.
All right, that's a great place for us to work together, and especially if Greg's working on it, I probably talk to Greg every day. So.
Yeah, and I also should point out that I do know that just this last year, they pulled in all the national park road data into our transportation. I'm not sure exactly where it is and getting it up on the, in all the services and everything, but I do know that they've integrated Park Service road data into our transportation.
All right, that's great. That'll make sure everything lines up. That's a problem we had using OSM data.
So in the chat, Ed Phillips asked if he saw a mention of MRF imagery also.
I'm not sure what MRF imagery would
Ed,
be.
are you able to unmute and clarify?
Yeah, that's okay. It was at the very beginning. Maybe it was for another presentation. I'm sorry. I noticed all your was vector tiles, and I was just curious though if there was anything on imagery as well and how you're handling that. But I know it's a lot of things.
Our imagery service right now, we're using NAPE, but we needed to have a little bit better imagery, so we are using our Esri imagery.
I think we've got Rob Dollison. I think we've got Rob Dollison on, who may be able to answer. Yep. Hey, Rob.
Yeah, I just had a question related to, I know, when we first worked with Mapbox, we had run into some challenges with licensing issues where we first had to buy an internal copy and we wanted to use software as a service, but it wasn't available for us to use then. And I'm curious, how you've evolved from some of your license requirement. I know you touched base on OpenStreetMaps and the ODBL license there, and some of your move to other data. Did you have to do, did you have challenges with that as well with license costs? I know you sounds like you're almost all open source now, but have you?
Yeah, there have been a lot of challenges, I would say. We are using a product from Mapbox called Atlas, which is then installed on Geo platform. So we're using we're using them as kind of our source to run everything.
Yeah.
That gets us around a lot of the FedRAMP requirements since it's being run internally. As far as just data licensing with OpenStreetMap, we are very careful to just overlay our own data over top of it. And actually, if you look at the parks, you probably can't see any of these. Maybe if there's an edge here, we actually use this green area. It not only denotes the park, but it blots out the OSM data that is still being loaded into the map under it. So that's how we get around it. We are allowed to display the data. We just can't interact with the OSM data very much. I mean, there's some things we can and can't do, but we definitely don't want it to be included in our data or even inform any of our data.
And so is the license associated, the Atlas license that on GeoPlatform, is that available to other DOI agencies?
As far as I know, they are really trying to push other agencies to use it. They are paying for a license that can be expanded. And I see that there's a question about scaling. We don't have too many issues with our usage right now, but we have had problems with vector or the raster tiles in the past where they take a lot of space on that server and there's a lot of data going back and forth. But when we use vector, we're pretty good with running it. And I don't know the specifics of what GeoPlatform wants to do with that, but they would like to open it up to the entire DOI. And it's probably, I mean, if you work with them, they will try to get you to use it.
That was just, thank you. That helps just to know what options might be out there.
So I guess to follow up on the scaling, do you have a cluster of Mapbox servers that you have hosted in GeoPlatform, or just one super large one? Or
it is one super large server right now.
Okay. Does it have scaling capability, or would you more design it as like siloed Mapbox servers in some sort of auto scaling solution?
That's a good question. I don't know how you can scale Atlas. A lot of parts of it are distributed across different AWS services, and they are running it in Amazon. So they can put a lot of things on end nodes and cache things on these nodes. So that does help with scaling. But the main database is all one server, and I don't know how it could be split up, but that's more something that GeoPlatform can talk about than I can.
Okay. If it gets more popular.
Yeah, that's kind of our worry when they're saying like, hey, we need to get more users so we can lower your cost. We're like, well, if we get more users, then we're going to reduce our usage on it or something. But so far, it's been okay.
So just to quickly loop back to Ed's question about the MRF, meta raster format services, we do have, and I'm glad Rob's on, we do have the elevation and the imagery services that are using MRF. Is that correct, Rob? And I just wanted to check to see
the elevation.
Yep.
The elevation service is using our MRF formatted data. The imagery service is not available yet. I mean, we have a public URL, but it's not published and not available for consumption yet. But hopefully, with the work we'll be doing, rebuilding our overviews and I don't want to say not the wrong term all of a sudden, but our anyway, they'll be rebuilding each state here, and hopefully it'll be available pretty soon to use.
And Derek, they want FSX to help for that process.
Well, not only that, but actually we had to insert some code into the building of the mosaics and the overviews. I think especially the mosaics that enable it to take advantage of the pyramids in the MRF format. So that was one of the things we found that was hurting our performance, but hopefully that service will be ready soon. I do have a question also on, as you've gone through this evolution of building vector tiles and having to set up the styling and all this, Is it easier to do now? Do you think, as you watch the progression, I know you've had to change various software and different approaches to the data and things. Do you have a gut feel for saying how easy it is to start off and building this pipeline now than it would have been 5 years ago or more?
So I think there's a lot of better ETL tools out there, and at least within the DOI, we have a lot more access to things. We used to not be able to run Docker at all, and trying to do something like that would be hard. Now we can have containers that we just spin up. We have a cron job that spins up a container every other hour and goes out and updates certain things. And that's really great that we can just containerize these things and put them on servers. It doesn't matter which server ends up running it. We just moved a lot of stuff to REST-in, so we have a lot more server capacity, and I'm excited to get working on it, but it's a lot of work to move things over. But the process of creating these vector tiles, or the raster tiles, the original tiles, took forever. We were very lucky that we only needed to create tiles for the national parks. Everything else, we just used OpenStreetMap or whatever Mapbox gave us. And that was kind of a limitation just because it's cumbersome to create those tiles. And focusing on just the national parks allowed us to build them. But using something like vector tiles, our data already comes into our database as vector. So it's a lot easier to deal with. And your final files, while we still only need to worry about the United States, they're pretty big, but they're manageable, at least with current technology.
Thanks.
All right. Megan, any more questions in chat that you see?
Nope, I see some resources being shared, but no more questions.
I saw a couple of those pop up from Gita. Thanks. Kind of want to give one last opportunity. If anybody has any questions for Jim or the NPMap team.
Vector tile performance assessments, any warnings or gotchas on the technologies that you worked with? I noticed you said you had Esri vector tile packages, you had a couple others, or did you have a preference? Or I just know you can go down the road with some of these things and then find out limitations, that's not in the documentation.
Yeah, there are limitations in file size. They are not hard limitations where you can kind of go over them. If you make your tiles too big, they take too long to download, and they can also make your browser a little unhappy. And since we develop for mobile, that's also a consideration. Mapbox and Esri put hard limits on it at some point, and they start simplifying your tiles for you. We use a tool called Tippecanoe where you can set that simplification level. We did have a problem with points originally where it was dropping too many and parks didn't show up. So we needed to work around a lot of those things. I think we've kind of evolved with the technology, and it is a lot better now than it was even 3 years ago. The tools in there that kind of check for that work a little bit better. But you can't just we have much more ability to add things to the map than we used to. We used to be stuck with a 30K limit on style. Now we don't know what the limit is, but we haven't hit it. But the more complex your map, the slower it loads, and the more complex for your browser it is. And some of our tiles, it does seem like they take a while to load, and we might want to cut down how many layers we put in there. You can do a lot of things dynamically, say, I want to have something that just shows what's going to be on the map now, and then you click a button, and that goes out, pulls another service, and then displays those vector tiles over top of yours. And just as far as technologies go, Esri did adopt the Mapbox standard. So their tiles, while not being completely interchangeable, are very similar in the way they work. And most of the best practices from one can be applied to the other, such as tile size and styling rules.
Okay. Thanks.
All right. Yep. All right, that was a great round of questions. Jim, thanks so much for the presentation. I definitely want to follow up with you. Hopefully we'll get a chance to meet up at State of the Map in Tucson. It'd be really nice. And yeah, let's stay in touch. I don't see any other questions popping up. So with that, we're going to bring this to a close. Please come back again next month when we have the Geo Collaborate group and Sky Bristol on. We're looking forward to seeing you then.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much. It was great.
Thank you.